Welcome everyone to our session. Today, I'm very excited to be here to talk to you about kind of Google's thinking around retail edge in particular. So let me introduce myself. My name is Kuelgen. I am an app modernization specialist here at Google Cloud. I've been around for over 5 years at Google, done various different things at my time here in Google Cloud. I'm based out of Portland, Oregon, and I'm excited to be here today with my friend and colleague, Abdul. Abdul, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Abdul Kinadiyil, and I'm an app mod specialist as well. I've been with Google Cloud around 5.5 years.
Awesome. Thanks, Abdul. So I'll go over the agenda briefly, and then we'll kind of get started. So first, I'm going to cover some trends and challenges. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about edge architecture patterns. Then I'm going to turn it over to Abdul. He's going to go through the edge platform as well as a demo. Then finally, I have some questions that I'm going to ask Abdul, and then we'll finally open it up to Q&A for the audience. All right, let's start with trends and challenges. So first of all, let me say that I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I expect that most of us on this call are pretty aware of the trends in this space and the challenges. So we'll go over this pretty quickly. But with that said, there's a couple of key points here. And the first one is, I think this is pretty logical, but today there's a decent amount of data that gets generated at the edge. I think we all understand that. We've got different systems that sit at the edge, whether it's point of sale or IoT devices or things like that. But what we expect is that trend is going to grow. I think the number here is 10% of it's today, and then 75% by 2025 is what Gartner is predicting. Regardless of whether those numbers are exactly accurate or not, the point is that more and more data is going to be generated at the edge. The other sort of trend along with that is that there'll be more and more compute happening at the edge. That's not to say that public cloud is going away. Of course, it will be a mix of both, but there'll be things that you'll want to be able to do at the edge. And one of those things might be something like AI. And I don't know about you all, but when I think of AI, I often think about workloads that run in the cloud or maybe on-prem that have very high processing requirements, use maybe specialized hardware and things like that. And while that's certainly true to some extent, I think we're also seeing the fact that AI is becoming, the footprint's becoming smaller, it's becoming easier to use in many different locations, and we're able to have different types of hardware out there. If you think about it, even my phone today, right, it runs some AI right on the phone, for some certain simple tasks. So these are the kinds of things in terms of trends. Now let's talk a bit about challenges. Again, I think this will be pretty obvious to the folks that are joined us for this call. So we want to be able to ease provisioning and decommissioning. We want to be able to process information and make decisions closer to the edge. How can we leverage existing infrastructure? Obviously, we want to have a simplified software lifecycle management. We want to be able to provide a homogeneous deployment model. And when I think of homogeneous deployment model, obviously, we're talking about actually at the edge here, but ideally, your deployment model isn't that different whether you're deploying at the edge or you're deploying in the cloud, or maybe you're deploying in your data center. And then finally, one of the big tenets here and one of the challenges is, if you're operating a quick service restaurant, you likely don't have deep tech support in that restaurant most of the time, right? Maybe sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't. And it could be hours or days away sometimes. So it needs to be very easy to manage with minimal on-site resources. So let's cover some edge architecture patterns. So first of all, many organizations, you already have a cloud strategy in place. Maybe your hybrid cloud, maybe your multi-cloud, you probably have a data center almost certainly. And all of this stuff, of course, requires teams to manage all of these things. And as you add clusters or hardware things at the edge locations, right, it becomes that much more difficult to manage. So we need to think about this when we're solving for these solutions and what these patterns are, right? We need to have a plan for existing infrastructure. What can you do to reuse what you might already have at the edge? Another thing that's really important, that's just a key point that I'll bring up right away, is that you need to be able to run existing workloads. Not everything's going to be new and shiny, but we'll talk about that in a bit and a little more. And then ideally, you've kind of got a single platform. Again, I talked about that homogeneous deployment. So make it super easy to deploy, again, not just at the store, but also in different locations. So first, let's just briefly cover, when we're talking today, we're talking about customer edge. Well, what does that mean? Well, it could mean a retail store, manufacturing facility, warehouse, campus, etc. We're not necessarily today talking about other types of edge like a telco edge or even the ability to run things in Google POP locations, though a lot of it's applicable to that as well. So this one's actually pretty important from my perspective. As we're thinking about solutions, there are kind of three guiding principles that we think about when we think about these solutions at the edge. So first, we think about network tolerance. And again, I think this one makes a lot of sense. A lot of customers may have retail locations in hundreds of locations or thousands of locations. Some of those locations are going to have amazing connectivity. There's going to be no issues. They're always going to be able to talk back to the public cloud or the data center or a combination of both. Other places are going to have very spotted or limited connectivity. So one of the things that we think about is, how does a solution work when there is limited connectivity? And for each of these, we've kind of got a general litmus test that we use. And so for this one, if you disconnect the WAN, the solution should still be able to run for at least 4 hours. And when it reconnects, it should be able to immediately catch up and need no human intervention, sort of fully recover once that access is restored. Cost efficient. So this is important no matter what, right? Whether there are a bunch of corporate-owned retail locations, or maybe you've got a franchisee model where there are a bunch of franchise model where there are a bunch of franchisees that have different locations. And oftentimes, particularly in that case, the franchisees have a low margin and they don't want to go and spend a bunch of money. They want to spend as little money as they can. So one of our litmus tests here is that there is an ROI on the solution within 12 months for at least 80% of the consumers of those solutions. Finally, the next area here is ease of operation and adoption. So again, with thousands of locations out there, it needs to be super easy to both deploy and maintain. So, starting out with day 0 as well as sort of day 2 operations. And our litmus test here is that basically all T1 and T2 issues can be resolved without a human physically touching the machine. So again, super important, right? We understand that you're probably not going to have tech support on staff at these various locations. Okay, so in terms of what we want to do at edge platforms or what we want to see, right? There are different things, different experiences we're trying to enable, and different things that you want to do for that sort of connected store, right? So whether it's extending cloud capabilities over to the retail locations, or being able to run AI models and things like that we talked about, be able to have very sort of customer-centric, customer-focused things that are happening in your store, whether that's customization in terms of what's presented to an individual customer, and how do you manage your fleet and things like that. So in the end, what you really want to have here is a connected store, an intelligent store, and an automated store. And one of the things that I think about here, when I think about sort of customer-centric data is that, so I'm a vegetarian, and sometimes particularly I like to do road trips with my family. And so sometimes when you're on a road trip, you want to be able to eat at a quick service restaurant. So one of the quick service restaurants that generally has had good vegetarian food has recently made some changes where they've sort of got these kiosks that you can use, or you can use the app to order in store, and you can literally flip it to veggie mode, and they will show you a bunch of vegetarian choices and make it super easy with the ingredients they have for you to be able to order things that are vegetarian. And that's pretty simple, right? It's not really customizing for me per se, but it's still a great experience for me. All right, so let's talk about some of the technology considerations at the edge. So first of all, and I'm going to say this again, we're going to harp on this a few times, but we understand that you're going to be able to need you're going to be able to need to run existing workloads, right? You may have a point of sale system that you need to run at the edge, or you may have other time management things, stuff like that. So we need to be able to support those workloads in whatever solution we have. But beyond those workloads, you also need to have a lot of flexibility. So you may need, some of those workloads might be running on a Windows machine, and you need to be able to run that Windows machine. Some of those things that you may want to do in terms of new capabilities are going to run AI, and maybe you need certain specific type of hardware. So there might be USB hardware acceleration devices and things like that that need to be available at the edge. And then finally, and this is really important, right? We believe it should be an open platform. So it should use familiar technology like Kubernetes and be built on an open source stack, which is why if you look at our Anthos solution around these things, right, it's all built on open source, whether that's Kubernetes or Anthos Service Mesh on top of Istio, maybe things like Cloud Run, which is built on top of Knative. Now, compute's obviously important, but data is also very important. And here, whether it's file data, object, or block data, you basically need a common data fabric that you can use at the edge that is easily deployable, that can be highly available, it's easy to back up. And so we've been working hard on getting that together. We've been working with partners to be able to bring that experience to the edge. Now, application patterns. So again, there are going to be things here where there are offline scenarios where it needs to be able to continue to run even when it's disconnected. And there are other things where we want to be able to run things and be able to make decisions with very low latency and make those decisions in real time right there. And then finally, you're going to have this deployed again across very many locations. So another thing to add or think about as we are doing these things is event processing. So there's all kinds of different event processing that might take place at the edge. First of all, obviously, there's going to be things where you're going to want to stream them up to the public cloud to be able to run maybe very, very sophisticated models or use them for detailed analytics. But there's going to be a lot of data that is generated, a lot of events right there at the edge, right? These could be with IoT devices, cameras, sensors, all of that information. And you want to be able to process that information locally, again, to be able to make those decisions in real time. CI/CD, so we talked about this. Ideally, you've got a common deployment model, makes it very easy to deploy to different locations. And a common deployment model doesn't mean that you're deploying the same software, the same solutions, the same code base to every location. You may be trying different things in different locations. You may have different software that you run just based on the location because the consumers are different or what you're trying to do is different there. I talked about peripheral integration a bit and when I talked about events, but obviously we need to be able to integrate with all of these things, all of these devices, all of this IoT that is running at the location. And then finally, I'm just going to wrap up here with day 2. Right, we understand that you've got to be able to operate this efficiently. So, what does it cost? How easy is it to provision? How can you fix issues? Finally, I'm going to wrap up here before I turn it over to Abdul and just sort of quickly talk about. So we talked a little bit about the technology and how you do that, but you also want to be able to drive some business value. So you want to be able to do things like get insights, right? Understand your historical trends, be able to predict things and influence your supply chain. You want to be able to personalize things. So you want to be able to enhance the customer experience, make it more, maybe have particular offers for particular folks as they're in your store, right? Be able to customize display boards and things like that. You want to be able to streamline operations. You want to make it easier for your employees. You want to make it a better experience for your customers. One of the things here, just as an example that I could think of, so I am a big DIY person. I do a lot of things around the house. I go to the hardware store frequently. And generally, before I go to the store, I'll go check online and see, hey, do they have the thing that I want in stock? And that's pretty straightforward. I think that's fairly straightforward for folks to do now. But sometimes I'll go to the store and they'll say they have 40 of this thing and I need 3 of them, but I go to where it's supposed to be and it's not there. Now, this is where the experience becomes much less than optimal. Usually I've now got to go find an associate That associate usually looks at their app, they pull in 2 or 3 other associates, they're trying to figure out where in the world this inventory is, and then, I usually waste 30 to 40 minutes, and I've had this happen multiple times. And these are the kinds of things that we want to try to improve upon and make it so that, we know exactly where that inventory is if it's not stocked, and ideally it's stocked before I even arrive there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abdul and let him take it from here.
Thanks, Greg. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen? I believe so.
It's coming up. All right. Yep. We see it.
So let's take a look at the Edge platform. Anthos software platform allows you to run distributed applications using containers and virtualized workloads. You can manage configuration and enforce policies across thousands of clusters using Anthos config management. Anthos collects telemetry and log and other operational data, and it pushes all this data to Google Cloud so that you have a single pane of glass in Google Cloud to monitor and understand the operational stats for all your apps. Anthos as a platform can be deployed on Google Cloud, other public clouds, on-prem location, and edge location. So now let's take a look at the Anthos bare metal deployment option. That is the one which you will be using for Edge. So Anthos bare metal. In this case, the customer is managing the OS lifecycle. And Anthos bare metal has a pre-flight check to validate minimum system requirement. It can be installed on physical infrastructure as well as virtual infrastructure. It supports RHEL, CentOS, Ubuntu, and other OSs. And Google provides an overlay networking and L4 and L7 load balancing. It can be integrated with any storage solutions that support CSI driver. And it supports in-place upgrades for your entire cluster. And as we discussed in the previous slide, it provides observability and a single pane of glass for your entire fleet of clusters. You can also integrate other application performance management tools and extract the data from Google Cloud and use it there. So you may be thinking now, do I need to modernize all my application to take advantage of the Edge capabilities and platform? The answer is no. You can run legacy workload, like if you have a POS application built using a legacy technology, and if it is running on a VM, you can take that VM as is and then run as a container through KubeVirt. So in this case, you have one single platform at Edge, which can run both legacy as well as modern workload. So the Edge stack as part of this solution has both hardware and software component. Let's take a detailed look at each part. On the hardware side, you have the physical or the cloud host server, then host operating system, network, disk, GPU, TPU, and optionally you can deploy it on the virtualization or the VMs. On the software side, you have container orchestration platform, which is Kubernetes, then Anthos config management, policy manager, and the apps are deployed to the namespace and the actual workload like VMs, machine learning workloads, services, or IoTs. And on the top, you can see it is the load balancing ingress layer. Anthos on bare metal can be deployed in different configuration. What you see on the screen is the HA configuration in which we have 3 nodes in the cluster. You can also deploy it on active passive like 2 node clusters or in a single standalone cluster. You can easily roll out this HA cluster across your thousands of stores. Google offers a fully managed solution for your Edge applications. In this case, according to your requirement, the Anthos bare metal is pre-configured and packaged in an appliance. We have a bunch of partners to help with this effort. And then these appliances are shipped to your stores. And we also provide 24/7 support for the entire stack. So in case you have a problem with the cluster or the stack, you have the support ready. You can also leverage the existing infrastructure. Like if you have a commodity x86 hardware, or if you want to have a small footprint like an Intel NUC, you can install Anthos bare metal on that. So you don't have to modernize your infrastructure to take advantage of this solution. Now let's take a look at the application software delivery cycle. So for an application developer, I need to make the code change and then push the changes through the CI infrastructure and make it to the Git repository. So once it is there in the Git repository, the Anthos bare metal clusters has a Anthos config management component that is pre-configured to pull these application software or YAML definition from these repositories. So once the changes are in, or your new code is in the Git repository, automatically these clusters pull those versions and deploy to the cluster. So it has a little bit more sophisticated feature, like you can set up different kind of repos. The root repo in this case has more stable version of the code. It is targeted for entire clusters, so that's available in Northwest and Northeast market. And if you are trying out new things like a new AI model and you are trying to target that only in the Rockies market, that version can be configured as a namespace repo and it can be pushed to the Rockies market. Similarly, anything else which you are trying, let's say you are trying a new UI and that you want to target for the South market. So that again can be configured as a namespace repo and those clusters will pull that. In this entire configuration, once the changes or the code is pushed by the software application developer, the clusters themselves pull according to the configuration of the cluster. AI is impacting every step of the value chain in the retail, starting from demand forecasting, then price optimization, customer 360, and personalization. So let's take a look at end-to-end machine learning for edge applications. You can create and train AI model or machine learning model using Kubeflow and then Vertex API platform within the Google Cloud. Once the model is trained, you can export that to the GCS bucket. And then the edge location TF serving deployment is configured to pull those new models as YAML file, and then it will deploy to that edge location. And the front-end application and other applications can interact with this TF serving APIs and take advantage of that AI solution. And you can also optionally export the feedback back to the Google Cloud and then analyze that data, understand the efficiency, adjust the labels or attribution, and then push to the testing data. So system-wide view for the Anthos clusters, right? So Anthos provides a single pane of glass for overall your thousands of clusters. It provides cluster fleet management. Then it enables you for ease of adoption and scale, consolidated tooling, observability, etc. So we have been working with a lot of customers across different industries, such as retail, healthcare, manufacturing to deploy edge applications. Though there could be some difference in the use cases, the reference pattern and architecture are same across these industries. Now let's take a look at the demo for a modern quick service restaurant. So Abe's Burger is a fictitious restaurant. It has thousands of locations within the country. And now let's see what are the key capabilities that you need at the restaurant. So you may need to analyze the CCTV video feed and then kind of understand the dirty table or abandoned tables within the store. Similarly, you may need to analyze the video feed and kind of predict what's the wait time in the drive-through line. You also want to actually look at the refrigeration and identify any anomalies through the IoT and send those anomaly and data to your corporate office. When the customer walks in, you may want to present a personalized menu with items based on their purchase history. Demand forecasting is a key aspect. For location managers, they want to understand when is the peak hour, and then they can manage their staffs accordingly, like send some front-end staff to the kitchen, make the meals ready during the rush hours, and provide a better customer experience. So we don't have time to go through every capability here, but we will focus more on the demand forecasting and then the drive-through experience. So this is the end-to-end architecture for the demand forecasting. Here on the left side, you can see the edge location, which is creating the sales and inventory update events. That gets to the Google PubSub topics. And then from there, it is pulled by data flow process. And in the data flow, we aggregate the data and massage the data, aggregate it with product master and other data sets, and then push it to BigQuery. In the BigQuery, we apply the demand forecasting model and then export the results to cloud storage bucket. And then we have the Cloud SQL deployed in the Google Cloud, and there is MySQL instance in the edge location. So that data replicates to the edge locations. Now let's see the quick service restaurant UI first. You can see the quick service restaurant UI here, Abe's Burger. So as a restaurant manager, I wanted to know the demand forecasting for the day so that I can plan my staff accordingly. So you can see the peak hour is around 6 p.m. So I can move some of the front staff to the back and the kitchen side, prepare the meal faster at that time, and then be ready to provide the best experience to the customers. And you can see the interaction health. In the drive-through line, the current wait time is 3 minutes. Curbside, one customer is waiting, then inside 2-minute wait time, right? So it's all predicted through the machine learning model. And the local condition, there were multiple events actually created. One is there was a dirty table around 5:45 p.m. and that issue was resolved at the store. And similarly, there are other events like coffee pot law, which was discovered by the system by monitoring the video feed, and then those were also resolved. On the food and beverage section, you have the IoT sensors giving all this data from the fridge and other freezer, giving you the temperature and all those statistics. Now, let's take a look at the clusters and the applications that are powering this experience. So in this case, I have two Kubernetes clusters, one for two different locations. The first cluster, CNOOC 1, that is running in US Central, and the other one, CNOOC 4, that is running in US West, right? So each of them are the HA configuration. You can see 3-node cluster, right? And let me go back here. You can see the CNOOC 4, which is in the West, 3-node cluster. And let's see the workloads that are running in the clusters right now. So you can see QSR UI deployment. That's the UI application that we saw. And then there is another application, emitter deployment. We'll see more details about the emitter application later, but these are the two deployments. So now let's see how do we synchronize this application code, or how do we pull this application to these clusters, that may be thousands of clusters when you actually roll out this solution, right? So I'm right now in the control plane node, and let me pull a repository sync for the QSR application, right? So Anthos config management has the repository sync entity. So once the repository sync is configured for a particular application, it will pull the application code as soon as it is pushed or committed within the repository. So in this case, you can see the source commit hashtag is this one, and sync commit means within this cluster we are running the same particular hashtag, right? So if as a developer, if I am making some changes and pushing new code change, then the source commit hashtag will change, and that will get pulled within the cluster in another couple of minutes. So that's how it works. So you don't have to do any other change, or you don't have to press any button. Once the code is pushed to the repository, automatically Anthos config management pulls that new changes, because it always compares whether there is any difference between the current running version versus what is there in the repository. So now let's see the emitter application. So why we created the emitter application is, since it's a fictitious restaurant, we want to actually generate the sales and inventory events at each location, and then stream that data to Google Cloud for demand forecasting. So let's see the pods for emitter. That is this one. And let's take a look at the logs. You can see these events are being generated continuously. These are the sales and inventory events. So those gets actually pushed to the Google Cloud through the Google Pub subtopic. So let's see that. So these are the pub subtopics I have configured. So inventory and sales data that comes in here, and then it gets pushed by it gets pulled by the data flow jobs. So it gives you the graphical view of all the steps here. So the data is pulled, it is aggregated with product master, then it is sliced into different buckets, and then finally it is pushed to BigQuery. In the BigQuery, it gets into this data set and loaded to the table. Then we have a demand forecasting model here, which predicts the demand for a particular item per store in a given time frame. And then that data gets replicated to the edge location. Right? Now let me switch to the presentation. So this is the demand forecasting model that we used in this solution to predict the demand for items. So you can see it is a very SQL-like structure in the BigQuery ML, and you can define this very easily. And this current model predicts the demand for a particular item at a store in a given time frame. Now let's see the drive-through line experience, right? So right now you can see 2 cars are there in the drive-through line, and the system predicts like there is 3-minute wait for a particular one vehicle, right? So as the drive-through line increases, you can see the wait time predicted is also increased to 6 minutes now, right? And then during the rush lunch hour or dinner time, it will go to 13 minutes. So this data is predicted by a machine learning model, which is created and trained within the Google Cloud and deployed on the edge location. Right? So this kind of concludes the demo part of this session. Now let's get to the next segment.
All right, just a second. I'll bring up the additional slides and we'll wrap this thing up and get to Q&A very briefly. Yeah. Put it in. Okay. Oh gosh. There we go. Should be coming up any second. So, Abdul, I do have just a couple of questions for you. So the first question is, what capability or solution is most exciting for you at Retail Edge, and why?
I would say ability to roll out application across thousands of clusters without any manual intervention and just using GitOps model, right? So you may, as we discussed in the demo, you may have one version of the application that is deployed across the stores, and you want to try a new AI model or new change. You can easily configure different namespace repo and pull those specific configuration or application to that targeted cluster. So it's all automatically happening behind the scene. There is no intervention by the operator or the developer. Once the developer commits the code and push that changes, and it goes through the CI infrastructure to the repository, then it actually gets pulled to all the target locations.
Okay, awesome. So another question. So if I wanted to use, this Google Cloud solution at the edge, am I locked into GCP for everything?
No, it's more or less everything is open source. So Anthos, the software platform that is powering this solution, it is actually having most of the component open source, like the ASM, then ACM, and other components, right? So it's all open source mostly, and then we work with other vendors and partners solutions as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what you're saying is really that I'm not locked in, and if I've got other services from other cloud providers and things that I need to use to have connectivity, et cetera, that still works as well, right? All right. So my last question for you today is, does Google have all the answers when it comes to Retail Edge?
No, not at all. We are working with a set of customers in each industry, and it's a very exciting and new space for everyone, right? So definitely we are exchanging ideas and building and shaping these solutions across the industries.
Awesome. Thanks, Abdul. All right. So next steps. Here's some folks that you can contact if you're interested in learning more. We can certainly talk to you about your particular use cases and understand what you want to do. If you're a partner, you can certainly check out the Partner Advantage or reach out to your partner manager. And then finally, I just want to say that we've got another session coming up in April in the Cloud Innovator. So this is going to be held on the same platform. It's going to be held in Google Meet, just like this one. And there'll be a newsletter coming out with this information in the next week or week and a half or so. But this particular session is going to talk about Apogee and Anthos Service Mesh and how those two things work together to manage all of your APIs and services. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your time, and we will go ahead and open it up